Camping is supposed to be a peaceful escape from the daily grind, a way to reconnect with nature. But sometimes the serenity of the wild hides something far darker. Tonight, I bring you 4 horrifying camping stories that might make you think twice before venturing into the woods. From eerie whispers to impossible encounters, these tales will stick with you long after the campfire burns out. A family of 4 set up camp deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest trailhead. The first day was perfect. Blue skies, birds chirping, and the soothing sound of a nearby creek. They spent the day fishing, hiking, and soaking up the serenity of nature. As night fell, they huddled in their tent, enjoying the peace of the wilderness. But around midnight, something shattered that peace. Soft, deliberate footsteps began circling their tent. At first, they assumed it was an animal. The father whispered, "Probably a deer. Let's just stay quiet." But as the footsteps continued, their pattern felt unnerving, too methodical, too deliberate. Each step seemed purposeful, as if whoever or whatever was outside wanted them to notice. Grabbing a flashlight, the father unzipped the tent just enough to shine a beam outside. The footsteps stopped. He saw nothing but trees. "See?" he said nervously, trying to reassure his family. "Nothing out there." But the steps returned, louder this time. They circled the tent faster, almost frantically. It felt like whatever was out there was taunting them, testing their limits. Sleep was impossible. They sat huddled together, hearts pounding, until dawn finally broke. In the morning, they stepped outside to find a chilling sight, a trail of footprints leading away from their tent. Halfway through the clearing, the footprints transformed into long, deep claw marks before vanishing entirely. Whatever had been watching them wasn't human. Nearby, they found the family dog's leash, which had been securely tied to a tree the night before, frayed and dangling. The dog was unharmed but trembling, hiding under the remnants of their car. The eerie discovery left them questioning if they'd ever truly be safe in the woods again. 5 friends had planned their camping trip for months. Their destination, a secluded lake deep in the mountains. By the time they arrived, they were exhausted but excited. That first night, they sat around the campfire, laughing and telling ghost stories, the kind meant to scare but also entertain. As the fire burned lower, they began hearing faint whispers carried on the breeze. At first, they joked about it being part of the ghost stories, but as the whispers grew louder, they stopped laughing. The voices seemed to come from across the lake, rhythmic and deliberate, like a chant. The language was strange, neither English nor any tongue they recognized. "Who's out there?" one of the friends shouted. His voice echoed across the water, but there was no reply. Then, shadows began to appear on the opposite shore. Tall, dark figures emerged from the trees, their movements slow and unnatural, gliding as if they didn't touch the ground. The friends huddled closer together, trying to convince themselves it was their imaginations. But as the fire flickered and dimmed, the chanting stopped. The shadows disappeared, only to reappear behind the trees, much closer to the campsite. This time they moved with purpose, closing the distance. Panic set in. They grabbed their flashlights and scanned the area, but there was no sign of the figures. That's when one of them screamed, "Where's Emily?" She'd been sitting next to them just moments ago. Her flashlight was found near the water's edge, still on, but there was no trace of her. The friends called for help, but knew it would take hours for anyone to reach them. As dawn broke, they found footprints leading from Emily's spot into the water, but the prints didn't re-emerge on the other side. Emily was never found, leaving the remaining friends haunted by the shadowy figures that still seemed to linger in their dreams. Mike and Ben were lifelong friends who loved camping in the most remote areas they could find. One summer, they chose a spot deep in a national park, far off the beaten path. The first night was uneventful, filled with jokes, stories, and the crackle of a roaring fire. But as they were packing up for the night, Ben noticed something strange. "Hey," he said, pointing to the tree line. "You see that?" A figure was standing just beyond the firelight, watching them. Thinking it was another camper, Mike called out, "Hello? Need something?" The figure didn't respond. It didn't move. When Mike shined his flashlight toward it, the beam seemed to dim, as if the light itself was being absorbed. The figure turned and disappeared into the trees without a sound. They stayed awake all night, uneasy but convincing themselves it was a prank. The next morning, they found strange carvings on the trees surrounding their campsite. Crude faces with hollow eyes and clawed hands reaching outward. They packed up quickly, but before leaving, a park ranger stopped them. When they described what they'd seen, the ranger's face went pale. "Those carvings are from an old legend," he said. "They're called the Whispering Ones, and once they see you, they never stop following." That night, as they reached home, both friends found the same symbols carved into their door frames. A solo camper stumbled upon an old abandoned campsite while hiking deep in the woods. The tent was shredded, and the belongings were scattered as if someone had left in a hurry. It looked like no one had been there in years. Feeling emboldened, he decided to stay nearby and investigate further. As he lay in his tent that night, faint whispers began to echo around him. The words were impossible to make out, but they were everywhere, coming from every direction. He tried to rationalize it. Wind through the trees, maybe animals in the distance. He clutched his flashlight, his heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became a deafening roar. Then, suddenly, silence. The tent went cold, and his flashlight flickered and died. He spent the rest of the night frozen in terror. When dawn finally came, he stepped outside to find the abandoned campsite completely gone. There was no shredded tent, no scattered belongings, just an empty clearing. In the center was a rusted lantern, still glowing faintly. It wasn't his. Later, he discovered scratches on the underside of his own tent that matched symbols often associated with warnings. A local historian he shared his story with claimed the site was known as Echo Grove, a place where travelers vanished for centuries. Have these stories made you think twice about your next camping trip? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more spine-chilling content. And as always, stay safe out there.